10 years ago, Portugal decriminalized all drug use. And that was in lieu of them having a heroin epidemic. Over the last 10 years, Portugal has documented a 50% decrease in heroin use as a result of having decriminalized heroin. So it seems to fly in the face of what you would think would be logical.
So you favor legalizing heroin for utilitarian purposes?
No, I only favor legalizing marijuana. I espouse legalizing marijuana. Control it, regulate it, tax it. Half of what we spend on law enforcement.
Would the government sell it?
Would the government
Who would sell it?
No, I envision...
McDonald's?
Well, first of all, it would be 50 states. This would be left to the states, as is the distribution of alcohol. So I see it being very similar to the same distributions that alcohol is subject to.
So New Mexico could have a state store where people could go buy marijuana?
Could, but I would not want the government involved in state-run liquor. I would not want the government involved in state-run marijuana stores.
In your state? But you would leave it up to, if Virginia wanted to have state-run marijuana stores,
just as
the state of Virginia could
just
sell
as they
marijuana.
do right now. Yeah.
Okay, now, heroin. What would you do about heroin?
Well, when it comes to all the other drugs, I think that what we should do is look at harm reduction strategies, which are really real, which in a nutshell look at the drug problem first as a health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. We have the most effective policies in the world in this country for killing heroin addicts. Do we really want to kill heroin addicts?
So you believe it's not good for people to do heroin?
Right, exactly. It's not good to do heroin.
You don't want people to do heroin.
I don't want people to do heroin.
And you think the state has an interest in having policies that try and reduce the use of heroin in the United States of America?
I think what we have is an interest to reduce death, disease, crime, and corruption. All things that I would associate more with prohibition than the actual substances themselves.
But Governor, if I understand you correctly, you're not taking a laissez-faire attitude and saying anybody should be able to do heroin because that's their own business. You're not saying that. You think heroin, you think the consumption of heroin is a bad thing.
I do.
It's bad for the individual who does it?
Right, but what kills, Terry, what kills when it comes to heroin is quality, quantity unknown. They have a heroin maintenance program in Zurich, Switzerland. The chief of police from Zurich, Switzerland came to Albuquerque. This was in 2002. He said when they came out with a heroin maintenance program in Zurich, I've been in law enforcement my entire life. I was opposed to it. Everybody in law enforcement was opposed to this because death, disease, crime, corruption, they were going to skyrocket because they were going to make heroin free. He said, I am in Albuquerque here today to tell you that Zurich is a much better place to live today as a result of these programs.
But let me clarify your position, though. Are we starting with the premise that it is a bad thing and harmful for a person to do heroin? Or are you saying that it's only bad when a person does heroin immoderately and overdoses, takes too much or takes bad heroin?
You seem to be making that judgment. You seem to be making that judgment.
I think it's a bad thing for people to do heroin. I thought I heard you say it's not good.
I don't think it's good.
It's not
but
good.
Do you want to kill the heroin addict? If you want to kill the heroin addict, give him a product that is quality, quantity unknown. You want to keep the heroin addict alive and then statistically give him a chance to go off of heroin? Because everybody that goes on heroin gets off of heroin if they can live long enough to do that, but they don't live long enough because they take product that is quality, quantity unknown. They die from overdose. Women are involved in prostitution. They steal. They use guns. They have disputes that are played out with guns rather than the courts.
So you believe that it's harmful to do heroin. It's harmful to the individual. It's harmful to society too? Is it harmful to society when people do heroin?
If you are doing heroin in the confines of your own home, doing no harm to anyone arguably other than yourself, do you belong in prison for a health problem that you have?
But you do concede it's harmful for individuals. They're harming themselves.
Yes.
Okay, are they harming the community around them? Their family, perhaps? Maybe their neighbors?
Well, yes, and guess what? Right. The harm emanates from prohibition, not from their actual use, it's from prohibition.
That's what I want to know. So you don't think the actual act of taking heroin, perhaps being a heroin addict, the harm that does to you, it doesn't really do harm to you if you do it in the right quantity with high quality heroin. It doesn't do harm to you.
Well, of course it does.
Okay.
But by harm to you, are you harming anyone
No,
else? No, you're not.
Not your spouse, not your children, not your parents.
Let's take
neighbors?
the
Not your
comparison.
not your classmates
Let's
at
take the
school?
comparison of the heroin addict who is given heroin under a heroin maintenance program and the harm they do to their family, as opposed to it's illegal. You're going to go to prison, so you have to rob and you have to steal, and you take money that would have gone to for your kids' shoes and you use it to buy heroin, as opposed to not having to
So
do
let me
that.
make sure I understand, because I'm not sure I do understand your position. Are you arguing that as long as an individual takes high-quality heroin in the right dose in a well-monitored way, that person is not harming himself?
That person
Or
is
the
doing
community-
less harm
Less
to
harm. Okay,
themselves.
so
Less harm reduction.
all right.
Harm reduction,
So
Terry.
you do think the consumption of heroin in and of itself is harmful to the person who consumes it? It's harmful to his family and
as I
neighbors?
do a lot of
Okay,
things,
all right.
like too many Coca-Colas.
So you say, but you want to say is let's surrender any effort to try and diminish and eradicate heroin consumption in our society.
Because we've done this now for 70 years, and we now have 2.3 million people behind bars, and we spend half of everything we spend on law enforcement, the courts, and the prisons on drug-related crime. Wow, let's double down. Let's double down. Let's put 4.6 million people behind bars.
Now, I know you're against redistribution of wealth. Now, the heroin, of course, would you grow it in the United States?
Look, I'm not advocating. I'm not advocating legalizing heroin. I'm advocating legalizing marijuana.
Well, no,
when it
you're
comes to
not. Well, wait a minute now. Someone can use heroin in the United States if you're president or not.
No.
So you would
look.
You
We don't.
say
There
let's give
are
it a
harm
nickel.
reduction strategies, Terry, that exist
Right.
that minimize you as a heroin addict from dying being a heroin
All right,
addict.
so if someone tries to bring heroin in from, if you could rewrite all the drug laws in the United States, someone tries to bring heroin in from Mexico, what happens? Under your government, ideally.
Well, under my government, ideally, we would have legalized marijuana. So by legalizing marijuana, I think we just take giant strides toward rational drug policy
But
and
you're
a
not answering my
recognition.
question.
No,
Forgive
I'm
me,
not.
no,
I'm not.
no,
You're
no,
asking me
no,
what
no,
my
no,
policies
no,
would
no,
be,
no,
and
no,
I'm telling you.
No, I'm not. I'm asking you a very specific question. Massive amounts of heroin cross our border from Mexico every year. They're distributed in cities all across the United States. You're president of the United States, and you have a Congress that's willing to follow your drug policy. What happens when someone tries to bring heroin across the Mexican border into the United States?
Well, first of all, this should be a state's issue, not a federal government issue. I think the federal government has botched this. So I think there will be a lot less heroin crossing the border as a result of having legalized marijuana. That is my contention.
Now, Governor, I think you did recognize earlier that Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, the Commerce Clause, gives the federal government the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations. You do concede that, right?
Yes, Terry.
All right. So when a drug trader takes heroin in Mexico and brings it into New Mexico, is that trade with a foreign nation?
I don't think it's trade. I think it's illegal. I'm not sure.
Well, why is it illegal? Isn't it illegal because the United States government has the power, the authority to protect our borders
I suppose
and
so.
to regulate interstate commerce? Okay. So you are not suggesting, so you don't think the federal government should restrict the flow of heroin into the United States from Mexico? Yes or no?
I think the reality will be less heroin coming over the border.
If
That will
what?
be the reality.
No, well, are you going to restrict it?
Well, we restrict it today, and you point out that it's in every city, that there's an unlimited flow of heroin coming across the border. So let's double down, Terry. Let's double down. Let's put 100 million people behind bars in this country, because that's how many people have broken our drug laws.
There's a lot of other bad things coming across our border, Governor, along with that heroin. Heroin also, by the way.
And what else is coming across the border that's bad?
Is coming out of Afghanistan. And it is, but I still don't understand. It's a very simple question. If you were president of the United States and you had a Congress that was willing to enact the kind of drug legislation you want, would people be permitted or prohibited from bringing heroin into the United States from foreign countries?
Well, prohibited.
Right.
Prohibit.
So you would
Yes.
prohibit the flow. Okay. Now, if you were governor of New Mexico again, and you had a legislature that would do what you wanted to do, would it be legal for some guy to sell heroin to another guy in Taos?
No.
Okay,
Well, I don't
it'd be
think we know.
illegal. It'd be illegal.
Yes,
So you
yes.
you favor the prohibition of bringing heroin into the United
But
States.
what you're
and you,
failing
and you,
to-
and you favor prohibiting it
But
being
what you're
sold
failing
in
to
your town.
recognize is the diminished marketplace that would exist
Okay.
if marijuana were legal.
So you're not in favor of legal heroin, but you think making
You think that making it illegal is going to make it go away? Have you been living in a box, my man?
You believe the facilitation of marijuana smoking in the United States by the government will diminish the amount of heroin consumed in the United
Yes,
States?
I do.
Why?
Because right now prohibition is all about it's a prohibition phenomenon. It's cheap, it's easy to administer, it's a more powerful high. I think that the gateway
What's
aspect
a more powerful high?
heroin.
So you think the people who legally start smoking marijuana in Gary Johnson's America will be less likely to move on and use heroin than people who start smoking marijuana
I
in
think the
America
gateway
today?
aspect of marijuana is that the person that sells marijuana also sells harder drugs. When you take away that link, I'm going to suggest that there'll be less heroin use, as there was in Portugal. Portugal has documented a 50% decrease in heroin use over the last 10 years, having decriminalized heroin. Terry, how do you explain that? Or are you just thinking that's a voodoo kind of a thing?